Are you ready to alter your life? Because that's what's about to happen. If you're looking for a judgment-free zone where TMI doesn't exist, to have the conversations you're not supposed to have, and explore how to make small yet substantial, sustainable changes in your life to actually care for and empower yourself through physical and emotional fitness, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Alyssa Alter, MOMDON, the Amy Poehler of vaginas, author, speaker, coach, former Broadway performer, certified Pilates instructor, pelvic health expert, comedian, co-founder of postpartum.com, mom on the mend, and board certified doctor of nothing. I believe that if we put as much time, energy, and discipline on our insides as we do our outsides, we'll be unstoppable.
Welcome back. I know I say it a lot, and I'm going to say it again, that I am so happy that you're here. Your time is valuable, and it means so much to me that you share it with me and that you show up every week to spend this time together. Speaking of showing up, this week we're talking about pleasure. And pleasure doesn't just show up. You need to invite her to the party. And if the party sucks, if your party sucks, she's going to be a hard no. See what I did there? Okay, so let's figure out what it is that we need to let go of or leave behind in order to create a hospitable environment for pleasure. Let's plan a panty-dropping party that pleasure cannot wait to get to. In this episode with Danielle Savory, sex therapist extraordinaire, we're going to be talking about how she went from being so ill that she was bedridden through to healing her deep inner emotional trauma and living the life that she is meant to live. How we can use movement to connect to physical sensations in our body and how that can translate to the emotional sensations that we need to feel and experience in order to cultivate safety in our bodies. And this one I really love. Why we need to unwire, rewire learned experiences in order to rebuild our relationship with ourselves and the world with intention, safety, and, you guessed it, pleasure. Danielle is a master certified coach and pleasure expert helping women use their largest sex organ, their brain, for better sex and a more pleasure-filled life. She's the host of the podcast It's My Pleasure, and where Danielle weaves together her background in neuroscience, her expertise in mindfulness, and skills as a coach to help women rewire their brains and connect to their bodies for an empowering approach to sexuality. Did I say empowering approach? Empowering approach to sexuality. You can learn more about Danielle in the show notes and her online membership, Turned On Woman, and to follow her on Instagram. All of that is in the show notes. And I want to share with you that this episode is brought to you in partnership with a product that I love, a company that I adore, and have been recommending to clients literally for years, Ohnut. So you know how when you're learning how to bowl, stick with me. I promise there's a method to the madness. When you're learning how to bowl, you can choose at the bowling alley one of those lanes that has bumpers, which create a physical boundary that help you learn how to play the game. To improve whatever it's called, whatever the term is for skillfully throwing the ball down the lane. That's a lot like what the Ohnut does, but the Ohnut does it with penetration. So these silicone donuts, they're made of 4 interlocking rings, which you can use to customize the depth of penetration without sacrificing sensation. Ohnut is a simple and convenient way to adjust everything when penetration feels too deep, painful, scary, when it feels unsafe. These create a boundary for you to learn how to play the game, right? To learn how to, whatever the term is for skillfully throwing that ball down the lane. Can you tell that I'm a really good bowler? Is that the term? I'm a bowler. I'm good at bowling. Whatever. Make sure to check out Ohnut at the link in the show notes because this product is incredible. And even if it's not for you, check it out, learn about this company, and share with a friend. There's even a link in the show notes for their products. And if you use the code Alyssa7, and remember I spell my name with an I, ALISSA 7, you save $7. So with that said, are you ready to expand your definition of pleasure and have maybe your first whole body braingasm? Because that's what's about to happen. Danielle, thank you so much for being here. I want to jump right in and I want to ask you a question to get us started, which is, what is your favorite thing about the work that you do?
Oh, well, that's like the hardest question you're probably going to ask me the whole time. Oh, it just goes straight in for the goods.
Is that too big?
I mean, I love so many things about it. You know, it depends on each given day, right? Because it's like the work is so expansive. So it's like I did like a master class last week in my membership, and it was really about healing our relationships with our body. And it was so powerful. And, you know, it was tears and it's like deep healing work because as women, we reject our bodies pretty much our whole lives. And like, I could say that's like my favorite part, but then I also like, you know, like the more just like that might've been like intense and healing work, but then there's just like, oh, the orgasmic work. And I just had my first multi-orgasm, you know, and I get those kind of messages, or past clients, like they still message me because I'm a very like open communication kind of coach, and hearing about those. Or, you know, I mean, the other thing is like, I love learning and I love teaching. And so anytime that I get an opportunity to share, like I love being on podcast, I love being guest and just like talking about this, like I really love that aspect of just simply teaching about the mind-body connection, teaching about the brain. Like I'm a nerd at heart. So
same
teaching and love it. Like I love that. So it's like that connection with my clients, the fun stuff, the deep healing work, and then also just sharing and teaching is my jam. So like all of it.
Yes, no. And I totally agree. And I had a feeling your answer is gonna be like everything.
Yeah.
And I see so much of that in my work as well through working with clients with pelvic floor dysfunction. And I work with a lot of women postpartum. But I also, when I launched my first company, Pilates for Your Privates, I was shocked when most of the people that came to me were women who had not had children because of a variety of things, whether it was hormonal or past trauma that was sexual or not sexual. All sorts of components that then are showing up physically as things like vaginismus or recurrent UTIs or lower back pain, but it's connected to the pelvic floor. But really, in healing these symptoms, right, the work is so much deeper, which is why, I mean, my work exists at the intersection of physical and emotional fitness, because this idea that they're disconnected is cuckoo bananas. And if we're not treating the whole thing, or treating, addressing, speaking to, honoring the whole thing, we're doing everyone a disservice.
Yeah. Exactly. And I love how we just jumped right into it because I mean, that's exactly like what part of my own journey was like, I was bedridden for 2 years, a lot of chronic pain, a lot of health issues that went undiagnosed, like all these sorts of things, and trying to just attack the symptoms from a physicality point of view, where really it took me going deep into, you know, taking a look at maybe some trauma or connecting with my body in a loving and compassionate way, to healing some of those narratives that had been just blaring in my head. Like that, if you asked me anything, like, yeah, I did other stuff physically, but those were the biggest things that led to my healing and led to me really feeling whole, was like the mental, emotional work and, you know, that reconnection and trauma healing. That was what I feel like not fixed me, but healed me.
Healed you, yes. And the physical movement, the physical component becomes a tool to speak to that emotional side of it, through the nervous system to help recalibrate and rewire things so that then something that felt threatening can go from feeling threatening to less threatening to neutral to maybe kind of good to like, ooh, that's really good. And then we can, and we move through all of those stages, which take time.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm sure you encounter this in your work and with your clients and with the members of your online community, that it's so hard. We are so conditioned to expect, want, need, and we're desperate for a quick fix.
Yes.
Like that would be super cool.
Yeah. I mean, I want that for like all of the things, like obviously.
And
no.
That's not how it works. It's just, it's annoying and it's true.
Yep. And I think most of us get to that point, like afterwards, we're like, oh, that whole process was really amazing. And it was like, transformative in my life. But like that initial, like, you're like, wait, you don't have a pill for this. It's like that, like annoyance, like, I have to put some effort in. I have to work at this. But then later you look back and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's like it starts by doing a little bit every day. It's not a lot today and nothing tomorrow. It's a real alteration to your life.
Yes,
I'm joking
exactly.
with the show alter your life,
yeah. Got it.
Something I really wanted to connect with you about, which is why I reached out. After hearing you on Simone Soule's Joyful Marketing, which that episode, I just loved everything about it, but I especially connected to like listening to your butthole, because I talk about my butthole a lot because I tore mine in childbirth. And I just like, once you've had stitches in your butthole, like you're never the same.
Yeah.
And, but what that really brought up for me was, one, an opportunity to talk about buttholes right now. And number two, more importantly, talking about really when we've been taught always, like this is the circumstances, especially as women, we are not taught to listen to our bodies. People might say it, but like no one's actually encouraging it in our whole society, that when we're moving towards how do I, listen to my butthole, or I say a lot in terms of like postural alignment, like where is your vagina pointing? But then also energetically, like where's your vagina pointing? Like she knows shit. What is she telling you? What information does she have? When you work with people, like how do you start to introduce exploring that when it is something that is like, I hear your words, but I do not know what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. It really depends on the person. And there's a few different ways to talk about it, because it's interesting. Even though I'm not directly like a trauma coach, I work with people obviously around sexual well-being that we've experienced trauma, whether it's childbirth or little t traumas or just the way that we've been socialized, or like big T traumas. And so I think first it's always taking a gauge of like how safe does the body feel to this person, because I think there's that level of like disconnection. But part of the reason a lot of us have disconnected from our body is as a protective mechanism, as like a way to like guide us through our life. Like that wasn't a safe place to be. And so, first I just kind of assessing like where is this person at with their body disconnection, and how can I introduce this in a safe way? And really going in and just being like, it can be small things like the alignment that you were talking about. Like, okay, we can feel our breath, right? Like big movements, like you can feel your rib cage changing. You can feel your belly changing, like just starting to use movement as a way to connect to the body. Cause that's the easiest place for our brain to pick up on the body, right? Yeah. Like, as you know, as a movement instructor and stuff, right? So it's like, using the body, like, okay, you can feel your fingers moving. Now relax and notice the stillness, so helping people first just get into their body through a movement and then a stillness, and then getting into more subtle ways. Like, okay, well, you say that. When you're saying that, like, explain to me what's going on in your body. And then as we start to get introduced more into how our body feels, connecting that to the way that we're emotionally feeling, connecting that to the way that we, our thinking is influencing the way that we're feeling. And then kind of like extrapolating that into being like, okay, so, how much do you want to jump on your partner when you like feel like you literally are shrinking and, your vagina is crawling up inside your body? And they're like, oh, not at all. And I'm like, okay, see? So, it's like this step-by-step process. Like, this is not how it feels. But then using a contrast, like I do a lot of guided practices and visualizations with people, and allowing them to experience what it feels like to feel safe in their body, experiencing what it feels like to be relaxed, experiencing what love might feel like, what freedom might feel like, what all these sorts of different emotions might feel like, so that they know kind of where they're going and where they're aiming. And so that's more on the emotional side of getting them into their bodies. But then we also just use sensation, because so much of pleasure is directly related to sensation and our felt sense. And so, helping train that body and that part of the brain to turn into the felt sense of whether it's smell or taste or touch, and little practices and exercises so that we can really amplify sensations, because that's what we want to amplify in an intimate relationship.
And this, like, my brain is on fire right now, because you're saying so many things that I love all of it. And, the image, I say this a lot. So for my listener, like, I feel like you spoke to something I've talked about, which is how, like, we learn through contrast, right? We learn through contrast physically. We learn through contrast in all the ways. So naming it, seeing it, and naming it. Yeah. And there is, and this is with the using, I'm going to say, penetrative sexual intercourse as an example.
P and the V.
P and the V. Yes. Yes. That it's like, we're also taught that to be sexy, to be valuable in our sexuality, that sex is P in the V, and it's like mission, like there's like a couple of options, and it looks like this, and it's fast, and like we have this picture that like that's what's supposed to be so hot and sexy and sensual. And the reality is that is like one piece of a very big pie.
Yes.
Yeah. Where pleasure and sensuality and sexuality, and I don't even mean just like masturbating and either like stabbing yourself with a dildo or using a vibrator and staying external. Like all of these things can be just touching your body. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is sensual is igniting the senses. And so I think it's so beautiful. Like we said, like we don't jump from I'm scared in my body to like jam something inside something, right? We start in this way. I love how you said, how do we feel safe in our body?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, what's interesting, because you said like, oh, we don't start with like not feeling safe and jamming something in our body, which actually we do. We kind of do start there, because that's what we've been doing forever and not knowing, right? Like that's honestly actually how it starts, right? Like whether it's like, with the first person that you're with in the back of their beat up Honda Civic, right? Or it's like, exploring and doing it around because we think we should. And that's where I feel like the first disconnect for so many of us, with vulvas socialized as women really experience is we actually don't feel safe. We feel a lot of pressure. We feel a lot of tension. And then we are jamming things into our vagina. So it is peeling back and unwiring that and realizing that it can be a totally different experience because we started from there.
God damn, Danielle, you're that. Yes. And this, something I wrote about at postpartum.com and on my old podcast, Myth of Motherhood, I talked about this. And again, something you and I touched on before we started recording is I think that motherhood is definitely a transition in life where things are amplified to a level that like you kind of can't not see it or deal with it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't think it is the only thing that happens in your life that can be transformative and present those opportunities for reflection and growth and rebirth. And something I've talked about because approaching sex, and I mean sex as in like sexy times, like so not just P and the V, but intimacy.
Yeah.
Like what if we approached it like how we wish it had gone the first time around, where instead it was like, because I did that again, I tore my butthole. So I literally, like I said to Jeremy at one point, I was like, I miss you in this way. I would like to make out tonight. You may not touch my boobs because I'm breastfeeding and they hurt and I'll start leaking. And we could do maybe some over the pants stuff. That is it.
Yeah.
Nothing more. Because I needed to know I was not in for any surprises.
Yeah. You created the safety for yourself in that container. Yeah.
Right. And then it was, a series of conversations with a safe partner where there was vulnerability. And you know what's super fucking hot is like consent and vulnerability and boundaries, right? And it was and it's like, can you, from your perspective, working specifically in this space, like, what do you think it would be like if something more like that were our starting point, as opposed to our vagina's already crawling up inside of us and we're just jamming things in there hoping for the best?
Yeah. Well, I think it's so interesting because you said about, reconnecting with your husband, like starting how I wish it would be. And I think that's the thing with most women. I work with women in their 20s all the way through their 70s, right? And they, a lot of times we don't know what we wish it would be, right? To even acknowledge that we don't actually even know what our wishes are or our desires are or what are our turn-ons or turn-offs or like any of these kind of things, because we have so many stark visualizations in our head of what we think it should be and what it should look like. Even the idea of getting to orgasm, like that's great. But when we grasp onto like orgasm should happen in this way and it should happen every time, then we're creating a whole nother place for pressure and we're creating a whole nother box for ourselves. So I think that, first even acknowledging, like if you're listening to this and be like, I don't even know what I wish it would be like, welcome to the club and I see you. And that's part of the problem is like, we think we wish like something that maybe we saw in, a dirty magazine or porn or something like that, or even a rom-com, which I think are the worst when it comes to depicting like sexual relationships. Cause it's like, oh, you're really cute. And then throw me up on a wall. Like, no, like there's never attention to the parts that need attention. But I think from that perspective, it's like when you really think about pleasure as being the priority and also the path and also the destination, things change. Things change a lot when we are doing that, because if pleasure is the destination, am I creating a place that pleasure is invited to? right? Because when you think about like how our body is, and if we're experiencing a lot of pressure and not even related to sex, like I really want to take this outside of even sex. Like you had a hard day, we're operating on simmer in our nervous system just because of the modern day world and all of the expectations that we have on ourselves, all these sorts of things. Like your environment, your body is not welcoming for pleasure. We can't really even access pleasure from that place because think about like the way that our brain interprets a bad email or a client or whatever. It's like a threat, right? So then you're like, your brain thinks you're being chased. It's that same kind of thing.
We're about to be eaten by the saber-toothed tiger.
Exactly.
It doesn't know.
No, and it doesn't have time to stop and get it on. And you have literally no blood flow to even these parts of our body. So it's like when we really are thinking about like, okay, if pleasure is the goal, am I even in a space where I can receive pleasure? And then that becomes the first order of business, right? Like being able to connect with your body, take stock of where you're at, notice where you're at, and then how can I create a more hospitable environment so pleasure not only is like invited, but it wants to stay.
Oh my God, I love this, creating a hospitable environment for pleasure.
Yeah, it's a thing. She wants to be invited, but your party sucks.
She really wants to come. She really wants, she got the invitation, but she's like, this party blows.
Sucks. Yeah, like you're busy like being self-critical and rejecting, and then there's the shame game going on and compare and despair. She's like, none of these are my friends.
I hate them.
I not want to come. They're going to like bully me right out the door.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And so we can think about that in our... And that's how we like integrate this into our lives. Because I'm really glad you brought this outside of sex. Because again, like we can just stay stuck in there, but it's so much bigger than that. And so then we can think about what are the things I'm doing all day, every day? And are any of those creating any environment where pleasure might want to show up? Whether it's in the bedroom or like pleasure in terms of like that kind of laughing where you can't even breathe and your stomach hurts and like you just, and then you can't stop laughing about how hard you're laughing. Like, she's not even coming to that like, party.
No. And if you even just think about like so many modern day couples, like what are you doing in the evening, right? You're probably scrolling on your phone at the same time you're watching something that's jacking your nervous system up on Netflix, like the newest murder thing or something that's like, whatever. Like I love those, by the way. I'm not dissing those. But I'm not trying to have sex right then. So, but it's like, and then your partner might be like, hey, let's go up and get it on. And you're like so distracted by what's going on the television, or you're on your phone and you're like, well, I'm not as good as her and I'm not doing this. And oh, wait, now this is going on in the world and there's, like all this stuff, and you're wondering what's wrong with you because you don't want to hop in the bed. And it's like there's no space for desire. There's no space for pleasure. There's no space for even that connection because our nervous system and our attention has been hijacked by the world that we live in, and we haven't taken it back and harnessed it in and directed it to the things that we want, like creating desire, creating pleasure, and creating deeper connection.
So how do we do it?
Well, I think it's first, like I said, it's being aware of like what you're doing to begin with. And this is why I'm such an advocate of scheduling sex. And I can hear your eye rolls through the podcast waves. Okay. Number one, knock it off. I'm a sex coach. I schedule sex. You know why? Not because I need to and I'm so busy. And I'm like, what was that? Like little fires, small little fires. I don't know. It was the one
Little
with
Fires Everywhere?
Yeah, where she scheduled it and people make fun of her like, oh, you're probably the kind of woman that schedules sex. That's not what we're talking about here. Like, you schedule it so that you set yourself up for mind-blowing, amazing, multi-orgasmic sex. Not because we're like, oh, I just have to make sure I fit it in. I mean, that's part of it. But when you really think what I like to think of as what's required or what I want to do with my body to create the most ultimate orgasmic conditions, being surprised or having my ass grabbed when I'm cooking dinner for my kids and I'm already on high alert and all of that is not the way to go about it. Like that is going to shut me down, and then I'm going to feel guilty and, oh, I haven't done it for a long time and I probably should, and we probably need to connect this way, and where's our date night? You know, all of that sort of thing. And so when you put it on the calendar, when you've decided ahead of time, then you can see what you're coming with. Like, what is happening in your brain? You know, what are some of those type of thoughts or belief systems or things that you've even been thinking about that happened earlier in the day that are going to turn you off, and what I mean is like turn your body off, right? Like turn your nervous system on high alert and turn you off. The other thing that it allows you to do is prepare your body. So I call it, with my clients, I call it a bridge to the bedroom. And we have like a bunch of different practices and things that you can do so that you can get your nervous system to that place where pleasure can be invited, and I'm now connected to my body. And so then when I do connect with my partner, it's like so much better, and the arousal is even faster, and the orgasms are more frequent, you know, like all of these kind of things, because I'm intentional about my brain and my body and what I'm bringing into that connection with my partner.
And there's something so empowering about that. That, right, I feel like there's a lot of conditioning. I certainly felt this way, that like I was dependent on someone else for my pleasure and for my orgasms. And it wasn't because I would tell them, like they knew and I would accept that and that, you know. And like this, it's really, really stepping into and owning the space that you bring in for pleasure, but then you're also stepping in and taking up pleasure space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And
it becomes a priority. It's not a leftover anymore. It's not like, oh, let's see if we have energy tonight. It's like, this is important to me, and you're taking responsibility for it. You're owning it, so much so that now you've kind of lined up your intentions to create that desire and create more of that pleasure on purpose.
I totally see. I don't know if I am going to or can yet articulate it well. You probably can. But I'm seeing this connection to those types of practices, the bridge to the bedroom. I love that image. And how that embodiment then shows up outside of the bedroom, just shows up in your life, in your, just how you live in the world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing that I like to think about is you're working on these skills, right? Like the skill set doesn't go away because you're not having sex. Like there's so many skill sets that we're really working on when we prioritize pleasure. And, you know, it's not just the bridge to the bedroom. You know, a lot of the work that I end up doing with women, and I think the work that we most desperately need, is really the tone that we're residing in our body with. And I say tone because it's like, you can say words, you know, but the tone is going to have that inflection of how it feels in your body, right? You can be like, you're beautiful, damn it, you know, and like yelling it, versus like, oh, woman, like, I really appreciate this part about you, right? Like the way that we speak to ourselves, that self-compassion, that acceptance, that celebration, that appreciation, that gratitude, like all of these cheesy things that we hear about, but it does really make a difference. But those are things you practice in order to be able, again, to create this hospitable environment, right? So it's like, those are the skills you're working on, and those you take everywhere. You take, the skill of focus to stay in your body and stay with sensation, the skill of surrendering and letting go, the skill of vulnerability, the skill of being on your own side and compassion that leads to it, the skill of mindful, like loving attention and inhabiting your body and using it as a refuge. Like, when you decide that pleasure is important, these are all the skills you end up working on. And that's just, you just become this woman.
I love that woman.
Yeah, she's pretty awesome.
She's great.
Yeah. And she's very turned on and confident and bold and feels good and is taken care of in her well-being because of all the juicy neurochemicals and hormones and neurotransmitters that get released with the stuff. It's good.
Oh my God. This is so awesome. I am so excited to share this conversation, and like, you listening, I am so excited for you and what you're going to do with all of this information and how many times your brain exploded also. Something like even the permission to not orgasm every time, which we, as women, we know that, but that like, no, like that's, but that's, by making that our goal, we're doing ourselves a disservice. Yeah. Pleasure.
But listen to this one. If you are in a heterosexual relationship, can you be okay with not letting him orgasm? We're just going to leave that one there.
We're going to leave that right there.
Right? But these are all the things that we've been taught of like what a successful session looks like and how that's involved, where when we really come back to like pleasure, like we're really breaking down these belief systems and myths and paradigms that allow us to really expand our whole experience of pleasure and take it to that next level. But we can't really get there when we're going in so boxed in with so many different beliefs.
100%. Here's what I want to challenge the listeners to do is to, in the show notes, there's my Instagram handle and there's also Danielle's Instagram handle. And I want you to DM us with the number one thing that stood out for you from today's conversation, because this is like some seriously awesome shit. And I can't even imagine, Danielle, if this is what you're sharing on a podcast, I can only imagine the fiery magic that is happening in Turned On Woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
But this is the thing, like I just did a podcast episode on it because it's so interesting, right? We listen to these conversations, we read about these facts, and we're like, oh, like braingasms left and right. But then what actually keeps us from doing the work on it or creating these changes is we feel like we shouldn't have to, and sex should be easy, and I don't really need to. And you know what? We have a good enough sex life, so I'm not going to, right? And that's like the main feedback that I get from so many women is we highly think of education. Like it's like up there, right? Like especially in our culture, like you get highly educated in all the things, like, but getting educated on sex, like, why do you need that? Are you and your partner struggling? We have so much like should and like shame and like, wait, you don't know that already? You didn't know that your vagina is like inside of your body and the outside is the vulva? Like, ugh. Like we have so many like things that we are like shaming ourselves for, that I feel like it is a much harder step than most people think of, like learning and absorbing the knowledge and then having the courage to go and do something about it, because we're still so boxed in by our beliefs of what we would make it mean about us if we actually were to invest time or money or effort into this part of our life.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with me and listening to the end of this episode. Look at you. You're someone who finishes what they start. I love that about you. And if you're picking up what I'm laying down, be sure to visit me over at alissaalter.com for more resources on how you can alter your life, like downloading the 5-minute meditation that I use to start my day with confidence and ease, all before getting out of bed. See you next week.